The morning sun had barely peeked over the horizon when little Annie rushed out to the stables, her curly hair bouncing with each step. It was her daily routine, visiting Thunder before school. The big black horse had been part of their family since before she could remember, a gentle giant who'd watch over her as she played in the yard. But this morning was different. As she skipped down the path to the paddock, she noticed her dad standing there with slumped shoulders. Thunder wasn't standing in his usual spot by the fence. Instead, he lay motionless on his side in the middle of the field. "Daddy, what's wrong with Thunder?" Annie's voice trembled as she clutched her favorite stuffed unicorn tighter. Her father knelt beside her, his eyes filled with worry. "He can't get up, sweetie. He's been trying since dawn." The next few hours felt like a blur. The local vet arrived in his dusty pickup truck, carrying his medical bag that Annie usually found fascinating. But today, she couldn't take her eyes off Thunder. The proud horse who used to give her rides around the paddock now lay helpless, his dark eyes following everyone's movements. Dr. Chen spent what felt like forever examining Thunder. He checked the horse's legs, pressed different spots along his spine, and wrote lots of notes in his little book. Annie sat nearby, singing Thunder's favorite songs, the ones she always sang while grooming him. When the vet finally stood up, his face looked heavy with bad news. He pulled Annie's parents aside, but she could still hear bits of their conversation. Words like paralyzed, condition unknown, and humane option floated through the air. Even at 6, Annie understood enough to know Thunder was in serious trouble. Her mom started crying softly, and her dad's voice got that scratchy sound it only got when he was really upset. "How long does he have?" her dad asked. The vet shook his head slowly. "A week at most. He's suffering. The kindest thing would be to let him go peacefully." But Annie wouldn't accept that. While the grown-ups talked about arrangements and proper timing, she snuck away to Thunder's side. Laying her small hand on his strong neck, she whispered, "Don't worry, boy. I won't let anything bad happen to you. We're best friends, remember?" Thunder's ear twitched at the sound of her voice, and his big brown eyes focused on her face. There was still life in those eyes. Annie could see it clear as day. He wasn't ready to give up, and neither was she. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Annie sat cross-legged next to Thunder, sharing her afternoon snack with him like she always did. Her mom tried to call her in for dinner, but Annie refused to leave. "He needs me, Mommy. He's scared and lonely out here." Her parents exchanged worried glances but brought her dinner to the paddock. They set up a small lantern as darkness fell, and Annie continued her vigil. She told Thunder stories about their adventures together, the time he helped her find her lost kite, the morning they watched a family of rabbits hop through the field, and all the times he'd been there when she felt sad or scared. "Remember when I fell off my bike last summer?" she asked him, stroking his mane. "You walked over and stood next to me until I stopped crying. Now it's my turn to help you." Thunder's gentle snort was the only response, but to Annie it was enough. She knew in her heart that somewhere in that magnificent horse, strength remained. She just had to find a way to help him show it. As stars began twinkling overhead, Annie made a solemn promise to Thunder. She would find a way to make him better, no matter what the grown-ups said. Because sometimes, she thought, grown-ups didn't know everything. Sometimes it took a child's eyes to see what others had missed. The next morning, Annie woke up before her alarm clock even rang. She'd spent the whole night thinking about Thunder, her mind racing with ideas to help him. While her parents discussed arrangements in hushed voices in the kitchen, she packed her little backpack with determination. "I'm not going to school today," she announced at breakfast, her voice steady and sure. Her mom and dad exchanged worried looks across the table. "Sweetie," her mom said gently, "I know you're worried about Thunder, but—" "He needs me," Annie interrupted, something she rarely did. "When I was sick with chicken pox last year, he waited by the fence every day until I got better. Now it's my turn." Her parents couldn't argue with that logic, and after a quick call to her teacher, Annie ran out to the paddock. Thunder lay exactly where he'd been the day before, but his eyes brightened when he saw her coming. Annie set up her little camp next to him, her favorite blanket spread on the grass, her books stacked neatly, and her lunchbox within easy reach. "Today, we're going to have school right here," she told Thunder, pulling out her favorite storybook. "And you're going to be the best student ever." She began reading aloud, just like her teacher did in class. Thunder's ears twitched forward, listening to every word. Throughout the morning, Annie noticed small things that the grown-ups seemed to miss. How Thunder's tail would swish when she reached exciting parts of the story. How his nose would wrinkle when she shared her peanut butter sandwich with him. Little signs that told her he wasn't ready to give up. The local kids who usually played in the nearby field started gathering at the fence. They watched as Annie read, sang, and talked to Thunder as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Some brought carrots and apples for Thunder, creating a small pile of treats beside Annie's blanket. My grandpa's horse got sick once, one little boy shared, hanging over the fence. But he got better. Annie smiled at that, hope blooming in her chest. More stories followed, of pets who recovered, of animals who surprised everyone. Each tale made Annie more certain that Thunder could get better too. By afternoon, her dad brought out an old umbrella to shade them from the sun. He watched as his daughter shared her math homework with Thunder, explaining addition and subtraction as if the horse was genuinely interested. See, Thunder? 2 apples plus 3 apples equals 5 apples, and you can eat them all. Even Dr. Chen, who came to check on Thunder, was amazed by what he saw. The horse's vital signs were stable, and there was something different in his eyes, a spark that hadn't been there before. Keep talking to him, the vet advised Annie. Sometimes medicine isn't just about pills and injections. As evening approached, Annie's mom brought out dinner for both of them, a proper plate for Annie and fresh hay for Thunder. "You're just like Florence Nightingale," her mom said, smoothing Annie's hair. "Who's that?" Annie asked, curious. "A very brave nurse who never gave up on her patients," her mom explained, looking at Thunder with new eyes. That night, Annie refused to leave again. Her dad brought out sleeping bags, and the whole family camped beside Thunder under the stars. "You're teaching us something important," her dad whispered as he tucked her in. "About hope and love and not giving up." Annie fell asleep with her hand resting on Thunder's neck, feeling his steady breathing. She knew most people thought she was just a little girl who didn't understand, but she understood something they didn't. Sometimes the heart knows things that science can't explain. And her heart told her Thunder still had fight left in him. Tomorrow would bring new hope, new ideas, and maybe, just maybe, a miracle. The third day dawned bright and clear, with birds singing their morning songs across the paddock. Annie had made the space next to Thunder her second home, with books, toys, and snacks scattered around her blanket. Her mom had even strung up some fairy lights on the nearby fence posts to make their camping spot cozy at night. That morning, Annie was having breakfast with Thunder as usual. She'd brought her favorite blueberry muffin, still warm from the oven, and was breaking off tiny pieces to share with him. As she chatted about her dreams from the night before, something extraordinary happened. "And then, in my dream, you were running through a field of flowers," she was saying, when a piece of her muffin dropped near Thunder's front leg. What happened next made her freeze mid-sentence. Thunder's leg twitched, not just a random muscle spasm, but a definite attempt to move toward the fallen treat. Annie blinked hard, wondering if her eyes were playing tricks on her. "Thunder," she whispered, her heart racing. She carefully broke off another piece of muffin and placed it near his other leg. Again, there was movement, small but unmistakable. She jumped up so quickly she almost tripped over her blanket. "Mom, Dad, come quick." Her parents came running from the house, thinking something was wrong. "Look," Annie said, trembling with excitement. She demonstrated her discovery, placing another morsel of muffin near Thunder's leg. Her parents watched in amazement as Thunder's leg moved slightly toward the treat. It wasn't much, barely a twitch really, but it was movement that shouldn't have been possible according to the vet's diagnosis. "What's in that muffin?" her dad wondered aloud, picking up the remaining half. Her mom listed the ingredients: flour, eggs, milk, blueberries from the farmer's market, those wild berries Annie picked from the back field. "Wait," Annie interrupted. "The wild berries. Thunder loves those. Remember how he always tries to reach through the fence to eat them from the bushes?" Her parents exchanged thoughtful looks as Annie continued her experiment. She ran to get different foods from the house: apples, carrots, sugar cubes, and more muffin pieces. With each test, she and her parents noticed a pattern. Regular treats got no response, but anything with those wild berries triggered small muscle movements. "I've been sneaking him these berries for months," Annie admitted, looking a bit guilty. "Every time I pick them, I save some for him. He loves them so much." Her dad pulled out his phone and started taking videos of Thunder's reactions, while her mom began writing everything down in a notebook. Word spread quickly through their small town. The local newspaper reporter came by to see the miracle discovery for herself. She watched in wonder as Annie demonstrated Thunder's responses, taking notes and photos for her story. But not everyone was convinced. Some folks said it was just wishful thinking, that they were seeing what they wanted to see. Annie didn't care what the doubters said, she knew what she'd seen. More importantly, she could feel Thunder's fighting spirit growing stronger. That evening, as the sun set and the fairy lights twinkled on, Annie sat with Thunder, gently stroking his mane. "You're trying to tell us something, aren't you, boy?" she whispered. "And I promise I'm going to figure it out." Her mom brought out hot chocolate and cookies, setting up their now familiar evening camp. As they sat together under the stars, Annie's dad made some calls to different veterinarians, explaining what they'd seen. Most dismissed it as fantasy, but a few were intrigued enough to agree to visit. "You know what, sweetheart?" her mom said, wrapping a warm blanket around Annie's shoulders. "Sometimes the biggest discoveries come from the smallest observers. You saw something we all missed because you never stopped believing." Annie snuggled closer to Thunder, her mind buzzing with possibilities. Tomorrow would bring more tests, more observations, and maybe even some answers. But for now, she was content knowing that her friend was still fighting, still trying to communicate in his own way. "We're going to solve this mystery together," she promised Thunder, and his gentle nickering seemed like agreement. Word about Thunder's mysterious responses spread quickly through the veterinary community. By morning, 3 more vets had arrived at the paddock, their cars kicking up dust as they drove down the country road. Annie watched them unload their equipment, clutching her notebook filled with careful observations. "Can you show us exactly what happened?" asked Dr. Lee, a kind-faced vet who specialized in difficult cases. Annie nodded confidently. She'd spent the whole night preparing for this moment, organizing her notes just like she'd learned in science class. "First, we need to get the special berries," she explained, leading everyone to the back field. The wild berry bushes grew thick along the old fence line, their branches heavy with dark purple fruit. Annie carefully picked a handful, explaining how Thunder had always loved these particular berries. Back at the paddock, she demonstrated her discovery. "Watch his left leg when I put the berries near it," she instructed. The vets leaned in close, cameras ready. When Thunder's leg twitched in response to the berries, a buzz of excitement ran through the group. "Now watch what happens with regular food," Annie continued, placing a carrot nearby. No response. She tried an apple slice. Still nothing. But the moment she brought the wild berries close, Thunder's muscles would twitch and move. Dr. Lee took samples of the berries for testing, while another vet drew blood from Thunder. Annie's mom had set up a table nearby with all their notes spread out, times, dates, reactions, everything they'd observed over the past few days. "We've been tracking his responses on this chart," Annie's dad explained, pointing to a paper covered in colorful markings. Green dots for strong reactions, yellow for weak ones, and red for no response at all. The most interesting pattern emerged when they looked at the timing. Thunder's responses were strongest in the morning, especially after dew had settled on the berries Annie picked. Could the moisture be making a difference? One vet wondered aloud, scribbling notes. Annie sat cross-legged near Thunder's head as the doctors talked in big scientific words she didn't understand. But she knew they were finally taking her discovery seriously. Her friend might have a chance after all. And young vet noticed something else while reviewing their notes. "The berries grow where the old mineral spring used to be," he said, looking thoughtful. "Those plants might be absorbing something from the ground, something Thunder's body needs." They spent the afternoon conducting more tests. Annie helped document everything in her special notebook, drawing pictures of Thunder's reactions and writing down every observation. Her teacher would be proud of how carefully she recorded each detail. News crews started showing up at the farm, drawn by the story of a little girl who might have stumbled onto something important. But Annie didn't care about being on TV, she just wanted her friend to get better. "You're doing a real scientific study," Dr. Lee told her, impressed by her detailed notes. Sometimes the best discoveries come from simply paying attention. Annie beamed with pride, but quickly turned back to Thunder. He seemed stronger today, more alert, watching everything with bright eyes. As the sun began to set, the vets packed up their equipment, promising to rush the tests and samples to their labs. Annie's mom made everyone sandwiches, and they sat around talking about other mysterious cases they'd solved over the years. That night, as Annie got ready for bed in their makeshift campsite, she heard the vets talking with her parents. Words like breakthrough and promising signs drifted through the evening air. She smiled, snuggling closer to Thunder. "City," she whispered in his ear. "I told you we'd figure it out together." Thunder's gentle snort seemed to agree, and even the doubtful vets had to admit something special was happening in this little paddock, all because a child refused to give up hope. The lab results arrived early on the 5th morning. Annie was sharing her breakfast with Thunder when she saw Dr. Lee's truck speeding down the driveway, kicking up clouds of dust. The way he jumped out of his vehicle, waving papers in the air, told her something big had happened. "It's incredible," he called out, rushing toward them. Annie's parents hurried from the house, still in their morning robes. "Those berries, they're special, really special." The doctor spread his papers on the outdoor table they'd set up, pointing excitedly at colored charts and numbers. "You see, this old farm sits on what used to be a mineral spring," he explained, drawing a simple diagram for Annie to understand. "Those berry bushes have roots that go deep into the ground, absorbing rare minerals that aren't found in regular horse feed." Annie leaned in closer, her eyes wide with curiosity. "But what does that mean for Thunder?" she asked, her hand resting protectively on her horse's neck. Dr. Lee smiled warmly. "It means your friend isn't paralyzed at all. His body was severely lacking certain minerals, like a car trying to run without oil. These wild berries are packed with exactly what his body needs." More vets arrived throughout the morning, bringing additional test results. They discovered that the morning dew made the berries even more powerful, which explained why Thunder's reactions were strongest early in the day. The mysterious condition that everyone thought was paralysis was actually a severe mineral deficiency. "So Thunder can get better?" Annie asked, hardly daring to believe it. The doctors nodded, their faces bright with optimism. "With the right treatment, there's a very good chance," Dr. Lee confirmed. "And you, young lady, helped us figure it out." They immediately started Thunder on a special treatment plan. The vets created a mineral supplement based on the berry analysis, while also incorporating the actual berries into his diet. Annie was put in charge of recording Thunder's progress in her notebook, a job she took very seriously. News of the discovery spread quickly. Other veterinarians began sending samples of their mystery cases for testing, wondering if mineral deficiencies might explain other horses' unexplained symptoms. Annie's berries became the talk of the veterinary world. "You know what the coolest part is?" one young vet told Annie as they watched Thunder receive his treatment. "Sometimes the biggest scientific discoveries happen because someone noticed something everyone else missed. You saw Thunder as more than just a patient. You saw him as a friend who was trying to tell us something." That afternoon, a team from the State Agricultural College arrived to study the berry bushes. They were amazed to find that this particular variety was rare, growing only in areas with specific mineral deposits underground. Annie helped them collect samples, proudly sharing her observations about how Thunder had always been drawn to these berries. "Nature has its own medicine cabinet," the lead researcher explained to Annie. "Sometimes we just need a child's open mind to show us where to look." They decided to name the berry variety after Thunder, in honor of the horse who helped them make this breakthrough. As evening approached, Annie sat with Thunder, reading him the get-well cards that had started arriving from all over the country. Other families with sick horses were reaching out, sharing their stories and asking for advice. Her mom helped her create a special scrapbook to save all the letters. "You're going to help a lot of other horses get better," she told Thunder, scratching his favorite spot behind his ears. "But you have to get better first, okay?" Thunder's response was a gentle nudge against her shoulder, the strongest movement they'd seen yet. The day ended with a small celebration in the paddock. Annie's mom baked a special cake, and even the serious doctors joined in the festive mood. As stars began appearing in the sky, Annie curled up next to Thunder, her heart full of hope. Tomorrow would bring more treatments, more tests, and more progress. But tonight, they had something worth celebrating: the power of a child's love and determination to change the world of veterinary medicine forever. The next few weeks brought incredible changes to the little farm. Thunder's special treatment was working better than anyone had expected. Each day brought new progress, small victories that Annie carefully recorded in her growing collection of notebooks. The first major breakthrough came during morning treatment. As Dr. Lee administered the berry-based medicine, Thunder's front leg moved, not just a twitch this time, but a real attempt to stand. Annie, who hadn't left Thunder's side, burst into tears of joy. "Look at you, boy!" she cheered, as Thunder's muscles quivered with effort. The vets gathered around, documenting every moment. It wasn't just about Thunder anymore. His recovery could help hundreds of other horses facing similar problems. Progress came in small steps. One morning, Thunder managed to hold his head up for several minutes. The next day, he could move both front legs. Annie celebrated each tiny victory, rewarding him with extra berries and endless encouragement. "You have to tell him he's doing great," she instructed the doctors seriously. "Horses understand more than you think." The medical team, who'd learned to trust Annie's instincts, followed her lead. Soon, everyone was talking to Thunder like he was just another patient who could understand every word. The paddock had transformed into a rehabilitation center. The vets set up special equipment to help Thunder regain his strength. Annie's dad built a support frame that could help Thunder practice standing once he was ready. Her mom planted more berry bushes along the fence, preparing for future needs. Local children started visiting regularly, bringing their own sick pets for advice. Annie found herself teaching other kids about the importance of watching and listening to their animals. "Sometimes they try to tell us what's wrong," she'd explain. "We just have to pay attention." One rainy morning, Thunder did something amazing. As Annie approached with his breakfast, he pushed against the ground with all his might. The vets rushed forward to help, supporting him with the special harness they'd designed. Slowly, shakily, Thunder rose to his feet. He could only stand for a few seconds before his legs gave out, but it was enough. The entire team erupted in cheers. Annie hugged Thunder's neck, crying happy tears into his mane. "You did it," she kept saying. "You really did it." From that day on, Thunder's recovery picked up speed. The medical team developed a careful exercise plan, helping him rebuild his strength bit by bit. Annie led him through his physical therapy sessions, walking alongside him as he took his first wobbly steps. The story of Thunder's recovery spread far beyond their small town. Television crews came to film his progress, and newspapers wrote about the little girl who had changed veterinary medicine. But Annie didn't care about being famous. She just wanted her friend to get better. Dr. Lee started teaching other vets about the importance of mineral testing before making difficult decisions about sick horses. Thanks to Thunder and Annie, he'd say, "We're learning to look deeper, to never give up too soon." Thunder's paddock became a place of hope. Families with sick horses came from all over, seeking advice and encouragement. Annie would show them her notebooks, explaining how she noticed the little signs that led to the big discovery. One evening, as the sun set over the farm, Annie sat beside Thunder as he munched on his dinner. He could stand on his own now, though he still needed rest between exercise sessions. The fairy lights twinkled overhead, and the sound of crickets filled the air. "You're the bravest horse in the world," she told him, sharing a fresh berry from their special bush. Thunder gently nuzzled her hand, his eyes bright and alert, so different from those scary first days when everyone had lost hope. As stars began appearing in the sky, Annie knew their story was far from over. Tomorrow would bring more exercises, more progress, more hope. But tonight, she was content knowing that sometimes the greatest medical breakthroughs come from the simplest things, like a child's love and a horse's will to live. 3 months after that first frightening morning, the farm buzzed with excitement. Thunder stood proudly in his paddock, his coat gleaming in the morning sun. In just a few hours, he would show everyone just how far he'd come. The local news crew had arrived early, setting up their cameras to capture the big moment. Families from across the country who'd followed Thunder's story gathered around the fence. Some had brought their own horses, animals who'd been saved thanks to the discovery of the berry treatment. Annie wrapped her arms around Thunder's strong neck, breathing in his familiar scent. "Ready to show them what you can do," she whispered. Thunder's gentle nickering sounded just like a yes. Dr. Lee stood before the crowd, explaining how this remarkable recovery had changed veterinary medicine forever. "Because of what we learned here," he announced, "over 50 horses have already been saved from unnecessary euthanasia. We now test every case for mineral deficiencies before making final decisions." Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Annie led Thunder to the center of the paddock. Gone were the support harnesses and medical equipment. Today, Thunder would show everyone that miracles really do happen. Annie's dad helped her mount up, just like old times. The crowd held their breath as Thunder took his first steps with his young rider. His movements were strong and sure, no sign of the paralysis that had once threatened his life. Slowly at first, then with growing confidence, Thunder and Annie made their way around the paddock. When they broke into a gentle trot, the crowd erupted in cheers. Tears flowed freely as people witnessed what love, determination, and scientific discovery could achieve. The local newspaper reporter wiped her eyes as she took notes. "From the brink of death to this," she murmured. "All because a little girl refused to give up?" Parents humped their children tighter, inspired by Annie's unwavering faith in her friend. The state's top veterinary college had already started a research program based on Thunder's case. They called it the Berry Project, studying how natural minerals in plants could help treat animal illnesses. Annie's detailed notebooks became required reading for veterinary students. As Thunder carried Annie past the cheering crowd, other success stories emerged from the audience. A woman spoke about her mare who'd recovered using the new treatment protocol. A farmer shared how mineral testing had saved his entire herd from a mysterious ailment. The celebration continued into the afternoon. Children took turns petting Thunder, who seemed to enjoy being the center of attention. Annie answered questions from aspiring young veterinarians, sharing her story with bright-eyed kids who dreamed of helping animals themselves. "The most important thing," she told them, "is to really listen to the animals. They're trying to tell us things all the time." Her words would be quoted in veterinary textbooks for years to come. As the sun began to set on their remarkable journey, Annie and Thunder took one last victory lap around the paddock. The fairy lights her mom had strung up months ago still twinkled overhead, reminding everyone of those long nights when hope seemed so far away. Dr. Lee gathered everyone for a final announcement. The berry treatment protocol would be named Thunder's Hope, ensuring that this brave horse's story would inspire generations of veterinarians to never give up too soon. Later that evening, after the crowds had gone home, Annie sat with Thunder under the stars. "We did it," she said simply, sharing a handful of the miraculous berries that had started it all. Thunder's gentle muzzle said everything that needed to be said. Their story had changed veterinary medicine forever, proving that sometimes the greatest scientific discoveries come from the purest kind of love, the love of a child for her horse. As Thunder grazed peacefully beside her, Annie knew that while some people might call it a miracle, she knew the truth. It was about believing in something even when everyone else had given up hope.